If they own your mind, they don't have to enslave your body. Of course not, because they own you already now, don't they? See, one of the things you have to guard against at all costs is to believe something that motivates you, that guides your life. Whatsoever that idea might be, you have to be extraordinarily careful. You can't hitch your wagon to just any old horse. You got to be very, very careful that the idea that you believe in, the things that you believe in, the things that you hold important, the things that you hold as a priority, you have to be absolutely sure of two things. Number one, that they're right. Because it's no good following an idea, an ideology, or what have you, that's incorrect, that is an incorrect representation of reality. That's the first thing you have to guard against. And the second thing you have to guard against is to make sure that this idea that's driving you, this idea or this concept or belief or this priority, well, you have to make sure that the consequences of this belief, this idea, this priority, is actually beneficial both to yourself and to the people around you. Let me give you an example. So there were a lot of people who believed in communism back in the day. And in point of fact, there are still a lot of people who believe in socialism or communism light, or call it what you will. And they think that communism, that the state owns everything and basically controls your life, they think that that is the best. But number one, they didn't realize that this idea was based on assumptions about human nature that are completely wrong. The socialism, communism, is based on the idea that we're all good people, but we're actually not. In a perfect world, if we were all good people, communism would be perfect for us. But the fact of the matter is that most people, most of us, you and me included, well, we're selfish creatures. We're selfish creatures. And because communism or socialism did not want to acknowledge it, cannot acknowledge it, because as a system, it does not work if people are imperfect and selfish. Well, because of this, socialism would inevitably fail. It would fail to describe reality, and as an idea, it would fail to help people. Now, the consequences of socialism, it inevitably leads to, quite frankly, psychopaths and mass murderers getting to the top of socialist regimes. And they wind up killing people en masse, killing millions of people, as they did. You see what I mean? Socialism, number one, failed to describe reality. And number two, its effects were horrifying, right? Now, of course, I'm taking an example to simplify the idea or the concept. But you always have to be examining your ideas for both of these. Number one, to make sure that it accurately describes reality. And number two, that the effects of these ideas that you hold don't bring unintended consequences or consequences that are horrifying for yourself or for others. Now, I was talking about political ideology, but to make it simpler and more personal, you could think of the own priorities or the own fixed ideas that you might have, and that guide your life. For example, suppose you think that the most important thing in your life, the number one priority in life, the idea that guides you, is that you should be happy. The idea of being happy is, of course, extremely seductive. Yeah, of course. I mean, because everybody wants to be happy. Yeah. Do you know of anybody who goes around saying, oh yeah, I want to be miserable? Of course not. Everybody wants to be happy. But the problem is that if that is your core idea, first of all, it's impossible to be happy all the time. Being happy is just a thing that happens sporadically in your life. It's not a constant, number one. And number two, of course, if you pursue happiness above all other ideas or all other priorities, it leads you very quickly to hedonistic behavior that can ultimately lead to your end. Think of drug addicts. Yeah, think of drug addicts. They're pursuing happiness, right? They're pursuing happiness. They want to be happy. And what happens, of course, is that they get addicted to some narcotic or some drug or whatever it may be. And this drug ultimately ruins their lives. And everything that they've done in their lives becomes a complete and utter mess because they are trying to be happy. You see the trap? Don't fall for that trap. Don't allow yourself to be sucked in by the notion of happiness. Don't allow yourself to be sucked in by an idea, a concept that guides your life without having examined it. See? Because if you have an idea in your head, an idea that somebody else put into your head, and you allow yourself to be completely convinced of that idea, then the people who put that idea in your head don't need to put shackles on your wrists and your ankles. They don't need to. But they've enslaved you even more powerfully than if you had shackles. A simple example that we've all seen going on right now. The media was selling the idea of the Russia conspiracy, that the Russians did it, that Donald Trump was elected because of the Russians, which is of course absurd. We all knew it was absurd, right? But there is a contingent, a not insignificant minority of people, actually millions of people in the United States, who truly and honestly believe this nonsense. They believe it wholeheartedly. They have become enslaved by this idea. And so they act in ways that we, who are not under this delusion, right? We ignore it and we laugh at it. And we are like, how can you believe this bullshit? Because it's bullshit. But they've swallowed it so completely that they cannot break away. They can't break away, and they're enslaved. They're enslaved to the people who created this idea. And you see it all the time. You see it all the time in these people who argue about Russiagate. And quite frankly, and you've met some of these people, right? Are they bad people? Truly, hand to heart. Are they bad people? No, of course they're not. They're very good people, many of them. Many of them, I would argue, most of them. Most of them are good and decent people. And they do believe in their hearts, in their spotless and innocent hearts, they truly do believe that the Russians did it, right? And why do they believe this nonsense? Because they are not examining what they believe. They're just swallowing it. And so because they're swallowing this idea without examining it, without looking at it, without really seeing, testing to see if it's true, since they're not doing that, they act in ways that are so foolish, so destructive. And they look at you, perhaps, who laugh at this whole notion of a Russian conspiracy. They look at you as the enemy, right? And they try to destroy the relationship that you and this person might have. Maybe they actually succeed in destroying the relationship you might have with this person, right? This person under this delusion, right? And they destroy it, and who does it hurt? It hurts them. See? You see how dangerous it is to believe in an unexamined idea? The thing about the truth is that the truth can be examined an infinite number of times, and it's always the truth. It never changes. The truth, you have a true idea in your head. You believe that, say, all water molecules are made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, right? And you can examine this concept, this idea, this notion that you have in your head. You can examine it till the cows come home. You can examine it for the rest of the lifespan of the universe, and it will always be true. See? And so that's why you should never fear examining the ideas that you hold. No matter how dear this idea might be, no matter how important it might be, you have to be willing to examine it and not be afraid to examine it. An idea that you are afraid to examine is an idea that is likely wrong. And if you are beholden to a wrong idea, to an untrue idea, then you will be manipulated. You will be used by people. Often as not, you will be used by the people who put that idea in your head. That's why you never want anyone to own your mind. Any idea in your head has to be a renter, not an owner. Yeah. I mean, any idea that comes into your head has to be examined, reappraised, constantly. And this is hard work. It's not easy to constantly be reappraising the ideas that you hold in your mind. It's actually quite difficult. It's quite difficult, and sometimes it's easier to just throw in the towel and say, fuck it, good enough. I believe in this. I believe in X, Y, Z, whatever. I believe in it and it's true, and I'm not going to question it. It's easy to fall into that trap. But it's a trap. You never want anyone to own your mind. You never want anything or any idea or notion to own your mind. They are only tenets, and you examine them and you check them out periodically. Now, you don't have to examine every single idea that you have in your head all the time. No, of course not. You don't simply have the time to do so. There are other things that you have to get done in your life, in your day. Of course not, right? But when you realize an idea, an important idea, is tripping you up, when you realize that a concept is causing problems, you believe in something, maybe it's very important to you, and you believe in something, and because of this belief, it's causing you problems. Problems in your work, problems in your social life, problems, I can't imagine how, but problems in your life. You have to set aside your fear that you might be wrong, which is the most powerful fear that you're going to have, and look at this idea. Look at it really, really carefully. One of two things is going to happen. Either one, you're going to confirm that it's true, or number two, you're going to discover that it's false. And both outcomes are good. Of course, because see, if you examine an idea, a closely held idea, an idea that really takes up a lot of space in your head, and you examine it and find that it's true, well, then you were right. Yeah. You discovered that it was true and no problem. Yeah. H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. I used a electron microscope or whatever the hell, and it's absolutely the case. H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. Anybody who says different is wrong about water. You proved it. It's true. But if you examine the idea, the notion, and it turns out to be false, and in the search to discover if it's true or not, you discover not only that it's false, but you also discover what is true. Well, then that's better for you. Yeah? You won't be beholden to a false idea. And if you're not beholden to a false idea, then your life will improve. So what's wrong with that? How can it be wrong to examine the things that you believe in as strenuously as possible? How can it be wrong? Tell me. Because either you discover that it's true and all's good, or you discover it's false, and by discovering that it's false, you discover what is true, and you follow that true path in a direction that will be beneficial to you, because following the path of truth is always beneficial. Perhaps not in the short term, perhaps not even in the medium term, but in the long run, it always is. That's why never let any idea own your mind. Never accept any idea that somebody else puts in your head without examining it first. Always examine it as carefully as possible, because it will only be to your benefit to examine it.